Long intros are cool because there's a little bit of anticipation, you know? I was one of those goofy kids whose year narrowed down to focus on Christmas from about September on. I guess I was like Ralphie in A Christmas Story, in that I would get swept up into the anticipation of the holiday, watching the lights go up, hearing the songs in the stores, getting special Christmas issues of comics and all that. A fashion show is like a 10-minute play, but there's all this anticipation, everyone arriving, finding their seats, then there's 10 minutes of people walking past and clothes and music, then the whole thing is finished. Any design, whether it's for a ship or an airplane, must be done in anticipation of potential failures. In many cases your imagination is much more effective than what can be shown. It primes you to know something is about to happen. The anticipation and anxiety is worse than what ends up happening. Hollywood, a city I was to come back to time and again, in sickness and in health, in success and in failure, with anticipation and with dread. If pleasures are greatest in anticipation, just remember that this is also true of trouble. So not only do we need to deal with threats as they emerge, we have to be thinking in anticipation of future threats, and the things we do have to be things that enable the system to continue to work. Wisdom consists of the anticipation of consequences. At any rate, I can only see such a success having positive effects for everyone, particularly as our anticipation of the World Cup would only increase further. The rollout of a new car is always filled with great anticipation. It's almost like going back to school for a new school year. There is no more respected or influential forum in the field of journalism than the New York Times. I look forward, with great anticipation, to contributing to its op-ed page. I always start tours with a great deal of anticipation. It varies from song to song, although Buck Owens and I recently collaborated on writing a duet together and am looking forward with a great deal of anticipation to recording that track for the new studio album. In fact, the sense of positioning, anticipation, is something very natural. I always knew where the ball was going to drop. A great source of calamity lies in regret and anticipation, therefore a person is wise who thinks of the present alone, regardless of the past or future. For most Americans, Friday afternoons are filled with positive anticipation of the weekend. In Washington, it's where government officials dump stories they want to bury. Good news gets dropped on Monday so bureaucrats can talk about it all week. Normally I work out a general summary of what I mean to do, then start writing, and the details can be different from my anticipation. So there is considerable flow, but always within channels. The racing driver's mind has to have the ability to have amazing anticipation, coordination, and reflex, because of the speed the car goes. In my view, a political vision is not a grab bag of discrete problems and solutions. It is the visionary anticipation of a direction. I can look at the future with anticipation, and it's comforting to know that someday, as Christians, we'll be able to look back and have a little more clarity on why certain things in life happen. I live in constant anticipation of good stuff. It's not being Pollyanna about things, but most stories don't have the ending we would give them right away. The better endings come later. It's the idea that anticipation is as scary as anything in a movie could be. People's imagination is the most effective tool in creating terror or dread. Such is the state of life, that none are happy but by the anticipation of change. The change itself is nothing. When we have made it, the next wish is to change again. Rebellion was amazing. There was a lot of anticipation leading up to that event. He who matures early lives in anticipation. We are ever on the threshold of new journeys and new discoveries. Can you imagine the excitement of the Wright brothers on the morning of that first flight? The anticipation of Jonas Salk as he analyzed the data that demonstrated a way to prevent polio? Expecting is the greatest impediment to living. In anticipation of tomorrow, it loses today. Nobody knows what anticipation is anymore. Everything is so immediate. The most important thing you learn as a sports photographer is anticipation, not where the action is taking place, but where it's going to take place. Not where the subject is now, but where they're going to be. To do justice to a lifelong dream of being a writer, I must give it the intense concentration and focus I gave to track. To do both with excellence is not possible. It is with a sense of sadness and joyous anticipation that I leave track and move on. Is anything, in all respects, so influential as consideration? Does it not, by a kindly anticipation, create the divisions of the active life itself? in a manner rehearsing and arranging beforehand what has to be done. Conscience is, in most men, an anticipation of the opinions of others. You can be taught so much, but the sense of anticipation cannot be taught. Conscience in most men, is but the anticipation of the opinions of others. As a child, I was bonkers for Christmas. The entire month of December, I couldn't sleep at night from anticipation. I look forward to death with great anticipation, to meeting God face to face. As Daddy said, life is 95% anticipation. Anticipation of movement, through muscular innervation and memory, by its retention of nerve impulse images, extend the present to the limit of a second or so. When I was little I always thought I was marked out, special, on the verge of something momentous. I used to tingle with anticipation. Our thinking and our behavior are always in anticipation of a response. It is therefore fear-based. But if we learn to think of it as anticipation, as learning, as growing, if we think of the time we spend waiting for the big things of life as an opportunity instead of a passing of time, what wonderful horizons open out. I like to compare the holiday season with the way a child listens to a favorite story. The pleasure is in the familiar way the story begins, the anticipation of familiar turns it takes, the familiar moments of suspense, and the familiar climax and ending. Giving consumers the choice of having it all in one big bite means different viewers are in many different places in the book, making it hard to discuss without spoiling the plot. The intervals between first-run programming provide a space for communion and that tantalizing sense of anticipation. We look forward with great anticipation to see the course that the National Space Council charts for America's future in space. Horror by definition is the emotion of pure revulsion. Terror of the same standard, is that of fearful anticipation. There is no great sport in having bullets flying about one in every direction, but I find they have less horror when among them than when in anticipation. Inherently, making a movie is tough because there's so much anticipation when it happens, even if everything goes well. Eventually, after the hero and heroine, it is the antagonist who comes with the most anticipation in any film. There's more anticipation, there's more forgiveness once you prove yourself to the fans. Visit our website for more quotes, quoting.com.